All right, so as you guys get settled with your meals and everything, I'll try to make this as painless as possible. I don't like to stand in between people and their food, so why don't we get started with this? So, my name is Calvin, here to talk to you guys about Agile Strategy Execution. Really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to speak today. So I met Adam a few months ago, and we had lunch and had a great time. I used to run the Industrial Engineers Group here in Atlanta also. He invited me to speak today, and I didn't know if I would get a meal out of the deal. So you guys have already exceeded all my expectations. So thank you so much for this opportunity. So I'm going to talk to y'all about a concept that maybe you are familiar with, maybe not. How many of y'all have been involved in strategy execution? Strategy planning, strategy, okay, so quite a few, okay. I was going to say if you haven't been involved in the planning side, you probably have been involved in the execution side, maybe against your will, but you've certainly been involved to some extent. Unfortunately, most companies execute strategy in a very dysfunctional way. And I'm gonna present the issue, and I'm gonna make the invisible monster crystal clear, and then I'm gonna present a solution to the problem, okay? Today, you're gonna learn a much simpler and much more effective approach to strategy execution. And it has 4 real core benefits, one being enables continuous transformation with the rate of disruption we see in the market, pandemics, supply chain issues, labor force demographic disruption or changes, folks retiring at an accelerated pace, and so many other things. Continuous transformation is becoming more and more important. Increased agility. Again, got to be able to adapt and still reach your goals despite the disruptions. Strengthen a culture of continuous improvement. I think it's a foregone conclusion that we should all be practicing some form of continuous improvement. Adam mentioned that there's a gentleman here that does lean and Kaizen, those kind of things. My background is very much in that space, as you mentioned. I've sort of evolved into Agile Strategy Execution as I realized that if it's not coming from the top, then probably not coming. So last but not least, develop a pipeline of leadership. With the number of folks that are leaving the workforce, they're taking a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, a lot of expertise along with them. And you got to have folks ready to step into those roles of greater responsibility. So I'm going to show you guys how to address all of these in one simple mechanism in just a moment. So who am I? My name is Calvin Williams. I'm the founder, CEO of a company called Impruver. I'll tell you more about my background and then I'll lead up into exactly what Impruver is and what it does. So I'm a South Chicago native. Grew up in South Chicago, went to Nebraska and Lincoln, track scholarship, also academic scholarship. By some miracle, I graduated a few years later with an industrial engineering degree and went to go work for Tyson as an IE, traditional IE stuff, labor studies, capital projects, cost savings, those kind of things. Wanted some CI experience, heard about CI, heard about lean, wanted some real experience. Took a role with Nestle, helped them stand up their lean and Six Sigma program. Got some great achievements, got some great accolades. Started to want some P&L ownership responsibility. So took a role with Colgate and later with Mars, worked my way up into plant leadership there and got recruited out by a management consulting firm, A.T. Kearney. And they're a global firm. Some of you guys probably heard of them. They're big in supply chain also, procurement, analytics, manufacturing. Most of my clients there were U.S. military industrial base. So BAE, General Dynamics, Raytheon, and those guys. Afterward, left A.T. Kearney after a couple years and went to go work for Clorox as the senior leader of global continuous improvement, where I was in charge of taking lean and continuous improvement, operations improvement initiatives, and strategy deployment out to their 36 factory network. And this is where I really got knee deep, I should say eyeballs deep in strategy deployment and learned a ton in that effort. So again, 36 plants. I would go out to each plant, spend a week there with their leadership team, banging out the perfect strategy, or what we thought was the perfect strategy. And again, this was an excruciating process. And then I would leave on to the next plant, right? A year later, I come back and I would always ask the same question. So how did last year's strategy go? Can anybody guess what the answer was almost inevitably? No, the strategy didn't go, right? Somebody left, customer left, supplier came, all the things in the world to prevent strategy from succeeding, right? So I realized, if this is going to be 36 weeks out of my year, this is not a great way to live a life. So I said, we got to fix this. So I found a few leaders who were willing to participate and experiment with me to try something different. And what we did was said, instead of me coming in, flying in, creating this annual plan that we see doesn't really work, instead, let's just set one goal. Where you want to be at the end of the year, where you want to be next time I come, right? And then let's break that down to something we can do in the next 6 to 12 weeks, right? What do you want to be in 6 to 12 weeks? So we got a long-term goal, a short-term goal, and then I'm going to do a weekly check-in with you. I'm going to call you every week. We're going to ask three simple questions. What's your goal? What'd you do last week and what you learned from it? And what you're going to do next week? Got into that rhythm, and it started to work extremely well, right? Brought a lot of sense of urgency, a lot of focus, better execution. Worked so well that these leaders started bringing their own teams in and started saying, hey, we're going to get my whole leadership team involved, and we're going to do a round robin style thing every week with them, right? Where the leader just said, hey, going to go around the table. What's your goal? What you do last? What you going to do next? Boom, 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 right? These plants went from achieving 2 or 3 big initiatives per year to about 15 to 17 big initiatives per year with just making this simple change, right? This worked so well. It worked too well. It worked so well that I said, you know what? I'm out. I'm going to start my own business. I'm bringing this to everybody because this is amazing. So that's what led to us creating Impruver. Maria's my wife. She's my co-founder and CFO and my other boss. She says that we need to get this done by 8 o'clock. So the babysitter's on the clock. So all right. So that's my background. I'm going to kick this off with a quote, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. So my friend Alan Branch, he's a connection, not a friend. I think we distinguish. There's a difference, right? He's one of the 14. So he wrote a book called Implementation. And in this book, he left a quote that said, strategy execution is the responsibility that makes or breaks executives, right? And that's striking for me. When I saw this, I said, wow, that's powerful. And the reason is because a lot of time we don't know how to measure the effectiveness of a executive leader. We see them, they're in the ivory tower, they're making speeches, they're doing things, but how do you know if a leader's effective? And really what it comes down to is how well they execute their strategy, how well they call their shot and hit it, right? Think of the Babe Ruth example, right, in the earlier days. So, all right, so let's zoom out and look at the issue more closely. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Agile project management. You guys have probably heard of it before. The opposite of Agile is what's called waterfall. And this is the traditional approach to strategy management and strategy execution. Leadership team gets together for about a week or two, creates this plan. This is our annual plan. We got all these projects, we got all these objectives, we got all these tasks, and we're going to spend the whole year executing this plan, right? And that's great, right? It's great to have a plan, great to have goals. What tends to happen is by the end of the plan, by the end of the year, is when you find out if the plan was terrible, or if it was good, or if, when you created the plan, you had no idea that a pandemic was coming. Who knew? Who put in their strategic plan that we're going to have a pandemic in February? Nobody. And the irony is 2020, right? 2020 vision. Nobody saw that coming, right? So there's a lot of problems with this approach in general, right? One, plans are created every year. It usually takes you a whole year before you learn anything, before you discover anything. So by the time you learn that, okay, was the plan good or bad, the money spent, the time is spent, you've already lost a year, right? You may be completely off course by then. There's no opportunity to pivot. There's no opportunity to make an adjustment. To create this plan takes too much time, too much energy. You're not going to go back and create another plan in the middle of the year. You're going to say, well, just keep going and we'll fix it next year, right? We'll get back on course. That's a lot of waste, an enormous amount of waste. We'll talk more about that in a second. So to manage this in a traditional way where you're create the plan, quarterly check-ins, you got everybody driving projects, everybody communicating up, doing reports and that kind of thing. It costs about $750,000 per 1,000 employees, right? Because in reality, if you're doing it right, somewhat right, you're getting everybody involved, right? And you've got a lot of hands on deck in driving this plan. So the unfortunate side of that, as McKinsey will cite and a lot of other reputable sources will cite, is that 90% of the time, this approach fails to deliver the anticipated benefit. And there's some real reasons for that. So as Dave talked to, if you read the headlines nowadays, you see a lot of companies laying people off, which is terrible, right? Nobody wants that in the headline. Nobody wants their company associated with that in the headline. It's never a good look. It's never a good way to go raise more money, right? So the reason companies, you see this, right? You got Amazon laying off 10,000, Facebook laid off 11,000, right? Ford laid off 3,000. Bird, I think that's the scooter ride sharing company, 23% of their staff laid off, right? Nobody wants to see that. And the reason this kind of thing happens is because companies are having to make drastic, highly consequential, embarrassing course corrections because they're using forecasts to figure out what to do. And they create this forecast and then they go staff up way too many people. And then when reality starts hitting, it's like oh crap, what did we do? And then you got to make a course correction. And the reason they have to do that is because they're not so agile. They can't flex to the needs of reality in the moment. So they're having to run the business in this kind of way. And the reality of all this is that it's completely preventable. So what does waterfall look like, right? So I'm trying to map this out, give you a concept of it. So what typically happens is the CEO or the executive team gets together and says, we're going to create 4 main objectives, right? We're going to be world class in this. We're going to be number 1 in that, this, that, and the third, right? So you got 4 objectives, and then they break that down into each of those are going to have 3 objectives with 3 bullet points underneath it, right? So now you got 12 different goals. This is just at the executive level. That cascades down one level, and they add more goals and more objectives and more metrics, probably, hopefully. Then all of a sudden you got a bunch more metrics, and then that cascades and that cascades, and that process pretty much loops and repeats until you get really to the front lines, because the front lines is where 85% of the workforce is. That's where the critical mass is at. If the transformation doesn't happen on the front line, it just didn't happen. That means it never got to the customer, because the front line is what serves the customer. So what you end up with is, with so many goals and so many objectives and metrics and things like that, it leads to what I call dilution. It starts diluting focus. It dilutes focus away from what's really most important to improve. And it creates a cycle of dysfunction within the company. So by the time you get to the front lines, the original intent and what was planned in the C-level and the C-suite is completely lost. And the folks on the front line, 86%, according to Cambridge University, 86% of the people in the companies, in most companies, have no idea what the company strategy is. And by then it's just, hey, let's just work on safety, quality, cost, delivery, and service, which we always do. So really, strategy never really happened. And again, this type of process has a 90% failure rate. It also produces some very unproductive behaviors. I'll just name a few here. One I call cowboyism, right? You got a few ambitious folks who, toward the end of the year, try to cram a bunch of projects through just to say they got it done, get credit for it on a performance review. A lot of time they create such a mess that the rest of the company has to clean up later, right? Box checking. This is just, again, completing tasks, not tied to any real results, just saying, hey, I got my stuff done, right? Empty speeches, right? This is like politicians, what politicians do. They talk, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but they don't actually put any resources behind it. They don't put time, they don't put commitment. They don't put the effort to make it happen, right? And making it happen is where you actually get benefit from the effort. So here's what it looks like. So let's say this is a flight plan. This is a flight path of an airplane, right? The goal is to take off here at day 0 and a year later be in a better place, in a new place. We're going to do quarterly check-ins to make sure we're on the right track. And then the actual looks more like the blue line here, where, pandemic hit. We didn't plan for that. Inflation, we didn't plan for that. Turnover, didn't plan for that. So all these, reality strikes. Mike Tyson said everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. This is companies getting punched in the face over and over and over. Halfway through the year, it's like, what strategy, right? Doesn't apply anymore because of everything that happened. So a couple of outcomes. A, strategy never really gets implemented. So we don't really know if the plan worked or not because it never got done. Or B, it does get done and the results are not realized for all the reasons you see here, right? Just lack of flexibility, mostly. Root causes, again, lack of flexibility to address disruptions, lack of focus on what's really most important to improve at any point in time, and then a lack of sense of urgency on executing on what's the highest priority. All right, so I'm gonna break down some bottom line costs. I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly in the interest of you guys' time. So I want you to get the concept that this has real bottom line cost implications, okay? So let's say the typical worker works about 2,000 hours a year, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, more or less. Most of a person's day goes toward what's called base work. This is doing the job, right? What's on the job description? This is providing a service, building a product, running reports, fighting fires, meetings, audits, etc. Just regular doing your job, like what you mainly get paid to do. A very small portion of that time, 30 minutes a day, goes toward improving the way work gets done. And ideally, you're improving toward your strategy, hopefully, so that you can continue to evolve and stay current with the market. This adds to about 6.4% of a person's day. You can extrapolate that out to a person's year, going toward strategy and improvement effort. So if you do the math on that, 2,000 hours at 6.4%, we're at about 128 hours a year per person going toward strategy and improvement. All right, if you pull back from that and look at a typical case of an employee in a company, let's look at this guy. Let's call him Mike. His company does waterfall. His boss comes to him and says, Mike, what are your goals? He comes up with 5 goals. He says, all right, go. It's going to be on your performance review. We'll see you in a year, right? At the end of the year, here's what happens. Here's how it shakes out. Goal A ended up being about 25% complete, but it turns out it wasn't so mission critical because of, a lot of things have changed. Goal B, he got done about 12 or 16%, and that one did turn out to be mission critical, but he was tied up with other stuff. Goal C got 100% done, but it became obsolete because of, some other changes. These are just no longer important. Goal D, 100%, but not mission critical, and then goal E, 59%. So this is how Mike's performance kind of shook out for the year. That adds up to about 4% of his effort going toward meaningful work that actually moved the company forward toward its goal. Actually helped the business grow, actually helped the business achieve some positive outcomes. So let's do the math on that. Again, we're at 128 at 4%, so about 6.4 of his hours. Of his whole 2,000 hours, 6.4 of those actually helped the company move toward its goal. That left about 122 hours of waste. So if his year, for every single employee, again, this is an estimation, 122 hours was wasted. You can put some bottom line costs to that, right? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, each employee is paid about $38.07 an hour, more or less. This is from 2021, so it's fairly recent. So if you do the math, 38 by the 122, you get to about $4,700 a year per employee, right? Working on things that became obsolete, working on things that were not mission critical, it turned out by the end of the year, and then just being consumed by what we call the whirlwind, which is like day-to-day firefighting, doing the work, right? And this doesn't even include opportunity costs. And I look at opportunity costs as 10x greater, because every employee should be making a 10x contribution to the business. That's how you grow. That's how you become profitable. So if you extrapolate that out, per 100 employees, you talk about $500,000. Per 10,000 employees, you're looking at almost $50 million opportunity. Amazon just laid off 10,000 employees, right? I mean, it's, some of these massive companies out here. So, all right. So let's pull back and let's get to the solution a little bit. Here's a quote from Stephen Covey. It's one of my favorite authors. The plane in flight is off course 90% of the time, at least. Weather conditions, turbulence, and other factors cause it to get off track, and often the plane arrives at the destination on time. How is this possible? It's almost like driving a car too, right? A pilot, when flying a plane, is making 1,000 micro adjustments en route to the destination, right? The nose gets incline or decline. He's getting alerts, right? He's got a dashboard. He's got a control panel that's saying, hey, make an adjustment here so you can stay on course, right? You're veering left. You're veering too far right, east, west, whatever it is. Weather's coming in. So he's got everything he needs right in front of him to optimize fuel consumption, minimize time required, get to the destination on time. And in a vast majority of cases, he's there on time. Leaders, on the other hand, in companies, are flying blind. They can't see where they are at any point in time. And in fact, what they tend to do is the plane takes off, it lands somewhere, we don't even know where it landed. We all pat each other on the back, and we get back on the plane and say, let's do it again. This is the dysfunctional cycle that companies are in year over year over year. Companies approach strategy execution in a few different ways. I want to go into a lot of detail on this, but on the spectrum of number of people involved, percent of people involved, everybody in the company being involved every day, right? Everybody every day, which is where the industry of strategy execution is going, if you want to call it an industry, is on the left side, you've got no strategy execution, meaning we don't do much of anything. We're just in a survival mode, firefighter mode every day. On the far right side, you have what's called Agile Strategy Execution, where everybody's got a goal relative to their respective domain, and everybody is driving what we call routine iteration or routine improvement toward that goal and measuring progress along the way. So in the middle, you got your waterfall stuff, right? Lone wolf CEO, this is hey, we just waiting until CEO tells us what to do, and then we do it, right? You got Hoshin Conry, OGSM, objectives, goals, strategies, measures, and that kind of thing. This is 3 or more goals defined down to the manager or department level, and then they do basically run projects off of that, and they do quarterly check-ins, right? That's very, very common. I think that came right out of Peter Drucker's Management by Objectives. More new age is OKRs, objectives, key results. This is bigger in the tech industry. This gentleman by the name of John Doerr came out of Intel. He took it to Google. Google did it for a long time. They became wildly successful, and then a lot of the tech companies kind of follow suit with that. But the trend is toward everybody every day, right? How do you engage in that last 10 minutes of your day? How do you get people to step forward before they step out? That's really the ultimate question, right? So what is Agile Strategy Execution? It's a mechanism through which companies set strategic goals, routinely iterate, and track progress against their goal and ensure achievement. There's 3 major paradigm shifts, okay? And some of this may be a little bit difficult to accept, but it's in these shifts where the real transformation is possible, right? The first one is going from batching of objectives, coming up with an annual plan with a bunch of goals and objectives, to a single piece flow of objectives. I think we mentioned Kanban. Kanban is like flow control, right? So going to a single piece flow of goals. Everybody has one goal at a time. You don't move on to the next goal until you've delivered excellence against the first one. The next paradigm shift is going from centralized strategy management to decentralized. Instead of having one person or a few people carrying the whole responsibility for strategy, you decentralize to where everybody has a small piece. And in fact, having one goal per person helps decentralize and gives everybody their piece of the pie. And the last one is probably the most important, is leaders go from judges to coaches. In a lot of organizations, leaders kind of delegate or dictate assignments, and then they wait and see if the person delivers. And they judge. They say, you did a good job or you did terrible. Consequences are coming, right? On the other hand, if leaders behave like coaches, they're actually on the field, in the play-by-play. I think like football is a perfect example, between every play, the coach is right there saying, all right, this is working over here, this isn't working, let's make some adjustments, let's go back out there and run the next play, right? That's a whole different paradigm than what the way most companies operate. All right, so those are the three. All right, everybody's still with me, so maybe it wasn't too controversial. Okay, so you see companies making this transition and seeing enormous results, right? On the left, again, we got the waterfall model. You got 4 of these big trees of goals inside an organization. What Agile says is, hey, let's get everybody with one goal from the C-level CEO all the way down to the front line, and let's get everybody executing what we call routine iterations or improvement cycles against their goal on a frequent basis, right? Might be more frequent at the front lines because you got, tighter feedback loops, more data at the front line. Might be more quarterly at the C level. All right, so the way this cascades, there's 2 ways of cascading and getting goals set for everybody in the company. First is horizontal cascade. A leader says, hey, here's the challenge. This is the North Star for the whole company. Could be any leader from a CEO down to a supervisor, frontline. And then they set a goal. So the challenge is 1 year out, more or less. The goal is maybe 6 to 12 weeks. Here's what it wouldn't be in 6 to 12 weeks, but it should be in the direction of the challenge. That challenge automatically cascades to become the challenge for their team, so they all have a collective challenge. Each of them sets a unique goal for their respective domains. For example, COO might be focused on reducing conversion cost. A CFO might be looking at material cost reduction, and a HR person might be looking at, reducing attrition. So everybody sets a goal based on their home, right? Their domain. There's horizontal alignment. Then there's vertical alignment. How do you get everybody else, right? Maybe we start at the C level. How do you get everybody else? So at each level, you're basically facilitating that horizontal alignment, but then you essentially cascade all the way to the front lines. So at the end of that, every single person has a goal, and they can tie a direct string from what they are working to improve to what the company needs to achieve. Everybody needs to understand their specific role in helping the company be successful. I studied and actually included in the book, I'll talk about the book in a moment, but the moonshot mission of the 1960s. JFK says, hey, we're going to send a man to the moon and back. They said that at NASA during that time, even the janitor clearly understood what the mission was and what their unique role was in making that mission a success. And the janitor couldn't fail. The janitor failing would have let the rest of the team down. So everybody was like pulling hard in the right direction. That's the kind of thing that this enables. And then it enables levels of achievement that you just couldn't get otherwise. What you end up with is an organization that looks a little bit less like the one on the left, where you got different people focused on different things, going in different directions, to one that looks more like the thing on the right, which as we approach Christmas, I think you guys can appreciate what that looks like. And the North Star analogy also makes sense there. So the key mechanisms: 1 challenge at a time per organization, 1 goal at a time per person, 1 iteration at a time per initiative. And if you're a coach, a leader coach, you're looking to build 1 skill at a time in the coachee. So this maximizes agility because you can learn, pivot, improve, learn, improve, pivot. So maximizes agility. You can't get more agile than that. In fact, as soon as you go to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, you reduce your agility. You reduce your ability to learn, reduce your ability to pivot. All right, so once everybody got goals, they use a process that we call FIT. Focus on what's most important to improve, iterate towards your goal, and track your progress along the way. And that enables a bunch of really cool things. One is it creates fluidity of strategy execution, meaning if the CEO says, oh, snap, we just hit a recession, we can't focus on lead time anymore. That was our priority before. We got to switch gears here. We got to now focus on cost reduction because, it's not enough money, So if we want to continue on our track, we got to focus on cost reduction. They change their challenge, they change their goal, and it creates a domino effect where everybody just realigns behind the new direction. You can't do that if you got a rigid plan with a whole bunch of goals in place. Next benefit, enables a CI culture. By having the 1 goal per person, there's a higher sense of priority of what needs to be improved next. So it enables that sort of routine iteration from the C level all the way down to the front lines, right? Everybody's sort of going through those iteration improvement cycles, essentially. So a lot of companies approach CI, they go straight to the front lines and say, let's fix them, while the folks upstairs are still doing the same behaviors as they had before. So from a cultural standpoint, it's almost impossible to sustain that way. If leaders want to see a real CI culture, they got to practice CI themselves, right? And this is what this enables you to do. Enables leaders as coaches. If I got a direct report and he's got 5, 10 goals, I'm probably not going to meet with him very often to talk about his goals because it's a big, long conversation. It's just impractical. But if he's got one goal, I can meet him in passing. Hey, what's your goal? What'd you do last? What you gonna do next? All right, good, go get it. I'll see you tomorrow, right? That coaching conversation becomes a lot more practical and efficient. Lastly, for that same reason, enables measures of success. If you got 5, 10 goals, you're probably tracking at least 5, 10 metrics. And that's also impractical. But if you got one goal, you're tracking one metric. If I'm trying to lose weight, I'm stepping on that scale every day. I'm gonna know my number. And if I don't know my number, and this is, I'm speaking from real experience, but if I go too many days without stepping on that scale, chances are I'm gonna start adopting bad behaviors again. I'm gonna start eating wrong and not exercising. I'm gonna go down the wrong track. So, all right. So here's what happens, right? We got Mike here again. Before, he was having 5 goals. 4% is really what was value added. He transitioned to where practically 100% of what he worked on is value added and relevant, because each new goal being set is most relevant to the times, right, at that moment. So the goal I would set before a pandemic is very different than a goal I would set after a pandemic. Same thing with inflation and everything else, all the other disruptions. So a lot more of his time and effort goes toward beneficial work. What this translates into is, instead of those losses, $5,000 per employee, $50 million per 10,000 employees, you're essentially reclaiming that immediately, but you're also seeing greater agility. You're also seeing greater personal and professional development. You're also seeing minimize opportunity costs, right? Because opportunity cost is a piece of that too, 10x. It's interesting tidbit to drop in here. So I was having a conversation recently with a gentleman, really smart guy. And the thing about goals and goal achievement and professional goal achievement is when a person is able to achieve a goal, they've made themselves more valuable. When a person is not achieving, they lose value. They fall behind in the market, because if the company is a well-run company, they're moving in the direction of the market anyway. So an achieving person is also moving in the direction of the market. A non-achieving person is essentially falling behind and they're losing value. So as a leader, the greatest service you can do to your people is help them achieve their goals. Act proactively. All right, just got a couple more slides here. So here's what a more agile approach to strategic execution looks like. Again, plane takes off, you still got all the same disruptions along the way, but you're making those micro adjustments like a pilot. And at the end of the year where you want it to be, you're a lot more likely to arrive at your destination on time. Frequent check-ins enable easier pivoting, maximize focus by setting one goal at a time per person, maximize sense of urgency by using shorter deadlines, and of course, you get faster results and faster learning by saying, hey, you got 6 weeks and I'll see you next week to see how you're doing. Boom, right? You're getting results in a few weeks as opposed to waiting to the end of the year to see how it goes, right? All right, so we've got a bunch of customers that we're helping to do this. A lot of them see dramatic results in just the first few weeks. Here's a couple examples. Sunbasket reduced changeovers 50%. Brook and Whittle, overproduction reduction 56%, 126% at peak, 55% at associated materials. So we've got dozens and dozens of these case studies. We've got a bunch of them on our website, in fact. All right, so a couple keys just to leave you with for execution or transitioning. 1, set a clear goal. Make sure you know where you're going and prioritize, right? One at a time. 2, gain alignment, get everybody moving in the right direction, help them prioritize. The more goals they have, the more decision paralysis they also have. 3, prioritize structured and frequent coaching cycles, that routine iteration, right? There should be something done and something planned every time you have that coaching conversation. And last but not least is number 4, demonstrate excellence. Be the change. All right, just one slide about what we do, a little bit more. So we're a software first company, but we actually offer a few things. We actually got a book that's being released later this week, 2 days. And actually thank you. Well, you guys are too kind. So I got a special offer for you guys because you're so kind and let me come in and speak. So I got a gift for you. We also have some learning, some e-learning modules that sort of get you sort of acclimated, help teach you some of the basics of, strategy execution in general, agile strategy execution. Actually got a certification process involved there too. We have certified coaches. We certify coaches. And we have a network of certified coaches who are building their own practices on this methodology and taking it into clients. We even help find them clients and place them in some of the companies that come into us. Our software, though, and this is sort of our cornerstone and what really got us going down this track at blazing speed, is it's a software that shows, it allows a leader or anyone else in the company to see how everyone else across the enterprise is doing against their goal at any point in time. So if people are hung up, they need help, it makes it easy to kind of find where the strategy might be falling short of expectation and then drive action to pick things up. Also has a great coaching tool we call the storyboard. If you guys ever heard of Toyota Kata storyboard, kind of tells where a person is against their goal and how they're tracking over time. And then lastly, we have a community that we run of folks that are curious, folks that are learning, folks that are actively practicing, folks that are coaching agile strategy execution. It's a great way to meet new people, maybe grow a business within that community too. So here's a certificate of achievement that our software spits out when someone meets a goal. So this is a gentleman, Prakash Khatri. He led a changeover reduction initiative, 50.2%, $150,000 savings in 6 weeks. And his manager went and signed off, and his coach went and signed off, saying, "Yeah, this is legit. This is great work. Let's keep going." So he rolled into another series of great initiatives right after that. So, all right. So this is my last slide. As I mentioned, this is a very exciting time for us. First book. It'll be available on Amazon on the 15th. So that's 2 days from today, so Thursday. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and chat with you guys. Okay, my pleasure. Thank you. Merry Christmas.